Thanks everyone for stopping by and taking some time with us today on this ProArc discussion about the SOC, Security Operation Center. And I have a special guest with me today who lives and breathes the SOC. He could probably run it in his sleep. His name is Mike Wirtz, and he is with us today to kind of do a deep dive into the whole world of the SOC and help us understand a little bit about what it is, why an organization needs it, and the value that it provides. How are you today, Mike?
Good, Karen. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really excited about this discussion, and I'm anxious to kind of understand and share with our audience here more about what it is. So why don't we just jump into the basics? What is the SOC? And tell us a little bit about the team that you have there and what they do every day.
Yeah, sure. So SOC, Security Operations Center, they definitely do a lot. They're your eyes in the sky. So it's really important that you have continuous monitoring, and that's what the SOC provides. So they have quite a few roles that they go through, and the primary job that they do is monitoring and appropriately responding to the security alerts and security events that trigger throughout your organization. And a typical day may revolve around that, and it usually includes monitoring your security solutions, security queues, any dashboards that have any security alerts that are triggering, and resolving tickets, alerts, communicating with clients back and forth. And it's a lot of investigation and remediation at times. So there's also times when a SOC member's not on an alerting queue, there's a lot of other areas that they still dive into. They work on program improvements, researching vulnerabilities and attack vectors out there that are being exploited. They're working on new detections all the time. And then what we don't like, but sometimes happens, are incident responses that will sometimes be working with us hand in hand on as well.
Wow. When I think about what your team goes through, it's pretty mind-boggling, right? Especially in today's world of security breaches and how heightened businesses need to be to stay alert with what is happening, because all it takes is one situation to not just bring a business down, but maybe even to close doors on a business. So I could see how incredibly important that team role is that you're doing for our customers and for anyone watching this video. So tell me a little bit about what are some of the communication processes between the SOC and the client when you discover a threat? What happens there? Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah. So really, before we start engaging with a client, we need to understand the proper communication channels and outline it. And there has to be a lot of trust and understanding between the client and the SOC team. So outlining those communication channels are critical. You want to make sure you outline and identify who a primary and secondary point of contact is as an organization, and maybe outline when their normal business operations are. Is it 8 to 5? When should they be contacted? Who do they contact if that primary is not available? So that really needs to be outlined before you engage your SOC team. When a threat is discovered, first actions may vary a little bit, but our idea and our SOC's first mentality is this an isolated machine? Is this going to impact other entities within our organization? Is this machine secure enough that I can go and contact the client right away? So our first thought is protect the organization, protect the data, and we try to do it in parallel, but communicate with the client. So that's why it's important you identify those communication channels really at the get-go and identify what our primary goals are. We do like to keep the client in good communication fluid back and forth. And sometimes that may be as simple as an email letting you know that we're starting to investigate an incident. It's contained, but here's some of the actions that we're starting to take. Or maybe it's more severe. It requires an immediate phone call. So we might call up the point of contact, that primary point of contact, and say, hey, there's something going on. Here's what we've done, but there needs further actions need to be taken.
Yeah, because I can imagine it's not just the threat itself, but it's the impact it has overarching on the business and potentially a business's customers, right?
Yep. Yeah,
Yep.
it's very critical that the SOC team understands the client's standard business operations for them to be able to identify what's normal activity and then what's not normal, something that's suspicious. So very
So
important. They work very closely together.
yeah, so you almost have to baseline their day-to-day operations so that when you take over, you know what is normal so
Mhm.
that you can identify something that is abnormal, right?
Correct. Yes.
And hopefully there's very few of those abnormal moments. So talk a little bit about what does an incident start with? So let's say there's an incident and it occurs. What would be like your very first step in that process?
Yeah. So it's pretty. I don't want to say easy, but you are able to tell a difference between an alert and an incident. So an alert may be a few not so malicious but suspicious activity that's occurring on a system. If you see a lot of alerts starting to occur, it's pretty indicative that there may be an incident that could potentially occur. So an incident is an over large issue that's occurring. So a system may be starting to reach out to other systems on the network, and that's something you want to take care of and stop right in its tracks. So our team, the first thing we do is we want to isolate that system. We want to isolate that incident from occurring. So we try to stop those things in its tracks before it becomes an incident. So you really want to look at every alert very closely. And that's why it's important to understand the standard business operations to know what's normal and what's not. But a lot of times, just knowing that is not enough. There's a lot of factors out there that lead to security incidents. And there's things such as just security misconfigurations. A lot of times when people moved remote, they were opening up vulnerable services to the internet. And that was a big attack vector for attackers out there. And the biggest one is the human element. So a user accessing a website that's malicious could unintentionally download malware on their system. Users plugging in an unknown USB drive or through the usual was a phishing attack. So all of that, you really have to have an experienced SOC team to understand those typical attack vectors out there and to really know what's normal and really something that should never occur overall anyways. So we pay close attention to all of that. And I would say it's really having good detections in place and then having that experience goes hand in hand with that.
So that's really interesting. I could see the human element being a big risk to security, right? We all get them. We all get those emails. We all get those. You need to look at your account right now because something's wrong with it. We all get them, and you do feel that urgency or need to do something. And obviously, all employees should check in with their IT department to make sure those are truly legit before they react, of course. So where does the customer, or I should say, where our customers, for example, like when we're identifying potential threats through those situations that are happening before they become big, and what role does our customers have in all that? Where do they plug into that?
Yeah. So the customer's role is just as important as the SOC team's role. So people hire a SOC team to take the brunt of all those alerts that come in, do the analysis, to really tell the customer what is an incident and help me protect it. So the customer role, as I mentioned, especially in the first few months, is to give us the context. Tell us what is your normal business operating procedures. But then if there is an incident that is occurring, we may need the customer to help us with that because we might not be on site. We might need physical involvement, such as system reimaging, or there's a legacy system on the network. You have to go take it off the network because it's legacy. It's really old. It shouldn't be on the network. Things like that. So it is very important. There's good communication on both sides. When you don't hear from the SOC team, that overall is a good thing. There's not much going on within your environment. But when you do hear from the SOC team, whether it's a phone call or a Teams message or an email, you want to take it seriously because they're reaching out to either get context to a situation so they can understand your business better, or they're reaching out because they need your assistance to perform some remediation actions that they may not have the capacity to do with the access and where they are right now in the organization.
So being very tight as one team, not just SOC, and then the customer's own IT team is separate. You're really one team addressing the entire situation that's happening and doing that in a concerted way together. So how do you work with teams like IR in a case like that?
Yeah. So when something turns to an incident response, the first thing you need to do, well, obviously you want to contact legal counsel. There's a lot of things you need to do, but one of the primary things is you got to generate your team. You got to assign roles. So it's called the cybersecurity incident response team. And there are a variety of roles that can be assigned. And they typically involve everything from recovery at the very end. But before that, you need to know what happened. So it comes from threat analysis, alert triage and response, root cause analysis. This is really where the SOC team thrives and where they really help the organization. So if I'm on site doing an incident response, I may be dealing with 30 things at once. You're on site, you're dealing with incident handling tactics, you're talking with management, you're trying to figure out what's happening, but everything you find, they're called indicators of compromise, and they're kind of little traces that an attacker left behind that kind of tells a story of how they got in, what they did, what's going on across the network. All of that data gets what we use a SIM, and all of that data gets sent to our SOC team in the background, and they do all the threat analysis. They're looking to see how the attacker got into the organization. They're doing all of that very detailed technical stuff while at the same time still protecting your organization, because there may be a million systems out there that are still vulnerable or maybe getting compromised in an incident response. So worst case scenario, if there's a ransomware event ongoing, you're going to have half the dedicated SOC doing threat analysis, the other half dedicated to ensuring no machines are still being compromised throughout the organization. So they just get kind of overloaded with a lot going on, but that's why they're there. They know what they have to do. We put everyone in their lane, give them a task, and we just start going through the incident response. So they're a very intricate part of that cybersecurity incident response team.
Tight process, very systematic. I like that. Makes me feel safe just listening to you. So, Mike, this was really great. I have been educated more so than my knowledge allowed me to know before. So, I really appreciate you taking the time. It's always nice to dive into what the world of the SOC is all about. It's the world of security. The need for security and security in a much bigger way is changing all the time. It's just a different world we live in today. And it's nice to know there's teams like ProArc that can be there keeping an eye out at all times and making sure that nothing's going to get through and things are headed off before they become big major problems that could really devastate a business. So thank you, Mike. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Yes, me too. Thank you, Karen.
Take care.